It all began on a Monday morning that had no business being as ridiculous as it turned out to be. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour night shift at the hospital. You know the kind, where your back aches like you've been hit by a truck, your eyelids feel like they're carrying bricks, and your soul quietly whispers, "Just make it to the couch." That was me. I was running on coffee fumes and sheer spite. But I made it. I turned down my street, already dreaming of my blanket and the soft hum of my ceiling fan. And then, I saw it. A strange car. Parked. Dead center in my driveway. I blinked. Squinted. Rubbed my eyes like I was hallucinating. But nope, still there. Now listen, I'm not the kind of person who flies off the handle. Especially not when I'm too tired to stand up straight. So I took a deep breath and gave the mystery car the benefit of the doubt. Maybe a neighbor had a guest. Maybe the driver didn't realize they parked on private property. Or maybe, just maybe, the universe was playing a sick joke. Instead of spiraling, I found a pin, scribbled a friendly little note, and tucked it under their windshield wiper. "Hi there. Just a heads up, this is a private driveway. Please don't park here again. Thanks." Satisfied with my non-confrontational approach, I parked on the street, which, by the way, is rarer than an honest HOA president in this neighborhood, trudged inside, collapsed onto the couch, and passed out fully clothed. Shoes on. Badge still clipped. Gone. I had no idea that was just the opening act of what would become a full-blown suburban war. The next morning, I stepped outside feeling mildly human again. Sunlight, coffee, and the promise of a quiet day. But my peace shattered instantly. The car was still there. Same spot. Same audacity. My note? Gone. Not tucked inside the car. Not even ignored and left on the windshield. No, it had been crumpled and shoved into the bushes like a piece of trash. Cute. I marched back inside, grabbed a boulder-colored notepad, and wrote a new message. Less friendly neighbor, more final warning. Private driveway. Do not park here. This is your final notice. Slapped it on the windshield like a badge of impending doom, and went about my day. I figured anyone with even a shred of common sense would get the message by now. Spoiler alert, they didn't. When I came back from errands later that afternoon, I pulled up expecting a clear driveway. Guess what greeted me? Yep, still there. Like a stubborn pimple on prom night. That was it. The end of my patience. I wasn't just tired anymore, I was offended. So the next morning, I waited. Coffee in hand, standing by the offending vehicle like a parking lot vigilante. I had facts. I had patience. I was ready to be polite, but firm. A lesson in basic property law was about to be served. And then, the door across the street swung open. Out she came. You know that feeling when your instincts scream, this person is going to be a problem, before they even open their mouth? That was her. The aggressive stride. The pastel sweater set. The haircut. The air of entitlement practically choked the birds out of the trees. She spotted me standing next to her car and marched over, her eyes already narrowed like I'd just insulted her entire lineage. "What do you think you're doing by my car?" she snapped. "Your car," I said evenly, "is in my driveway. You've been parking here for days. I've left 2 notes. She smirked. "I only park here because the street parking sucks. You're not even using it all the time. What's the big deal?" "The big deal? Let me count the ways. My elderly father uses that driveway to safely get in and out when he visits. My wife comes home from work and has nowhere to park. And me? I just want to sleep after a 12-hour shift without worrying if I'll have to walk a block with sore feet and a lunchbox." But I kept it simple. "This is private property," I said. "You can't just use it because it's convenient for you. Please move your car. And don't park here again." She let out the loudest, most dramatic sigh I've ever heard a human produce. It was like I'd asked her to climb Everest barefoot. She muttered something about selfish people and community spirit before dragging herself into the car and driving off like I'd ruined her day. I thought that was the end of it. Oh, sweet summer child. For 2 blissful days, I lived in a fantasy where common decency had triumphed. No strange cars. No entitled women with aggressive cardigans. Just the hum of my porch fan and the occasional sound of birds who, like me, thought the crisis had passed. But peace is fragile. And Deborah Whitmore, oh yes, I had learned her name by now, was not the type to retreat quietly. It was a Wednesday. I came home from a grocery run, arms full of bags and optimism. But as I turned onto my street, I saw it. Her car. In my driveway. Again. But this time, she'd taken it a step further. She'd parked crooked, blocking the garage entirely. My wife's car, which was inside, now couldn't get out unless it learned to levitate. And judging by the look on my wife's face when I showed her, let's just say levitation might have been safer than testing her patience that day. Fueled by rage and righteous property ownership, I stormed across the street and knocked on Deborah's door. She answered like she'd been expecting me, sipping from a mug that said, "Live, laugh, love." The irony so dense I nearly blacked out. "Oh, it's you again," she said, rolling her eyes. "Yes," I replied, teeth clenched but still civil. "It's me. The guy whose garage is currently blocked by your car." Again. She didn't even flinch. Just set the mug down with the deliberate grace of someone who thinks HOA newsletters count as law degrees. "Look," she said, "I'm not going to argue with you every time I need to park somewhere." The driveway was empty. "What's the harm?" "The harm," I said, breathing through my nose like a cartoon bull, "is that it's my driveway. Not a public lot. Not a shared space. Not a community project. Mine. And your car is blocking my wife from leaving for work." Deborah sighed. Not the tired, apologetic kind. "No, this was it. You're so dramatic," sigh. "Oh, why are you making such a big deal out of my blatant disrespect?" sigh. Then, with the enthusiasm of a toddler being told to clean their room, she stomped to her car, flung herself into the seat, and backed out in a rage. As she pulled away, she shouted out the window, "You're ridiculous. It's just a driveway." I wanted to yell back, "It's not just a driveway. It's a boundary you keep crossing." But I bit my tongue. For now. A week went by without incident. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd broken through. Maybe Deborah had finally gotten the message that she couldn't treat other people's property like her personal overflow parking. Maybe she'd found Jesus. Or at least a local parking garage. Then came Saturday. The morning began like any other: coffee, waffles, light jazz on the radio. I opened the blinds, looked out at the front yard. And my eye twitched. Her car was back. But not just her car, another one was parked directly behind it. A friend, apparently. They tag-teamed my driveway. I stared out the window for a long time, trying to comprehend the sheer gall of this woman. It was like she took my previous warnings and turned them into a game. I didn't knock. I didn't write another note. I didn't even bother yelling. Instead, I did what I should have done the first time. I took out my phone, snapped a couple of photos, called the towing company. They remembered me instantly. "Oh, that lady again," the dispatcher said, chuckling. "Say no more, we're on our way." Watching those two cars get hooked up and hauled off was, in a word, cathartic. Like yoga for the soul, but with chains and flashing lights. I sat on my porch with my coffee, legs crossed, smiling like a man who just discovered inner peace in the form of a tow truck. What I didn't know then, what no one could have predicted, was that this moment would light the fuse for the most theatrical meltdown the neighborhood had ever seen. It began 30 minutes later. Deborah came marching down the street like a storm in heels. Hair frazzled, purse swinging, phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. She looked like a suburban gladiator about to enter the arena. She stomped into the driveway, looked around, and froze. The shock hit her like cold water. Then she turned toward me. I was still on the porch, still sipping my coffee, still the picture of calm. "You?" she bellowed, pointing like I was a criminal in a lineup. "Where is my car?" I took a sip. "Oh, that? Got towed." Her jaw dropped. You could practically hear the hinges creak. "You towed my car? And your friends?" I added helpfully. "They were both on my property." Again. That's when she snapped. She let out a shriek so loud that 2 crows flew out of a nearby tree. Her arms flailed, her voice cracked, and she shouted, "You have no right. This is harassment. I'm calling the police." I leaned back in my chair, utterly unbothered. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll wait." I don't know what she thought would happen. Maybe she imagined the cops would show up, toss me in handcuffs, apologize to her profusely, and escort her car back to its rightful parking spot, like it was a returning hero. Maybe she thought this was a Hallmark movie where the rude neighbor always gets their comeuppance, and the poor, misunderstood community voice wins the day. But this wasn't a Hallmark movie. This was real life. And Deborah was about to learn that being loud doesn't make you right. She paced back and forth in the driveway like a detective at a fake crime scene, phone glued to her ear, voice rising higher with every sentence. "Yes, I want to report a man harassing me. Yes, he had my car illegally towed. I want him arrested. Right now." I just kept sipping my coffee. If smug satisfaction had a flavor, it would have been French roast with a splash of vanilla creamer. 20 minutes later, a black and white patrol car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out. One older, clearly the seen-it-all type, and the other younger, with the look of someone who regretted not calling in sick. Deborah made a beeline for them like a drama queen in her grandest scene. "There he is," she screeched, pointing at me as if I'd just committed treason. "That's him. That man had my car towed for no reason. He's been targeting me, harassing me. This is an outrage." The officers turned to look at me. I stood up slowly, gave a little wave, and said calmly, "Morning, officers. I can explain everything." The older one raised an eyebrow. "That true? You had her car towed?" I nodded. "Yes, sir. She parked in my private driveway without permission for the third time. I've left notes, spoken to her in person, and even warned her it would be towed if it happened again. I have photos, video footage from my security camera, and a copy of the tow receipt if you'd like to see them." Deborah's mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. She looked like a fish gasping for oxygen in a puddle of reality. The younger officer glanced at her. "Ma'am, is this your property?" Deborah huffed. "Well, no, but did he give you permission to park there?" "Obviously not, but I didn't think." The older officer held up a hand to cut her off. "Ma'am, a private driveway is considered private property. If you park there without permission, the homeowner is within his rights to have your vehicle removed." Deborah gasped. You'd think he just told her her HOA privileges were being revoked forever. "But I live in this neighborhood," she snapped. "I'm part of this community. He's being unreasonable." The younger officer gave her a long look. "Ma'am, being neighbors doesn't give you legal access to someone else's driveway. Do you have any documentation proving he allowed you to park there?" Silence. Deborah fumbled for words, but found none. Her expression wilted. "No," the officer said. "Then you'll need to contact the towing company to retrieve your vehicle. You'll be responsible for the fees. This is a civil issue, not a criminal one." I stood quietly the whole time, arms folded, doing my best not to grin like a cartoon villain. But inside, I was throwing a mental victory parade complete with fireworks, marching bands, and a float that read, "Respect boundaries," in glittery letters. Deborah's eyes locked on mine with the kind of fury that could melt steel. If looks could kill, I would have been vaporized. "You haven't heard the last of this," she growled. The officers returned to their car and drove off. Deborah turned on her heel and stomped away, muttering something about revenge and community values under her breath. And for a moment, it seemed like that was the end. For about a week, the world was calm again. No cars in my driveway. No letters. No shouting matches or stage performances for passing joggers. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, Deborah had accepted reality. But people like Deborah don't accept defeat. They rebrand it. One Thursday morning, I opened my front door to find something taped to it. A letter, handwritten in aggressively neat cursive. "Dear neighbor, you've made things very difficult for me with your petty and selfish actions. I've spoken to other neighbors, and we all agree that you are creating unnecessary conflict by refusing to share your driveway. As a member of this community, I expect you to be more accommodating. If you don't wish to cooperate, I will have no choice but to escalate this matter. Sincerely, Deborah Whitmore." I laughed, out loud, alone, like a lunatic. The idea that Deborah had rallied the neighbors against me felt like something straight out of a sitcom. I almost expected a laugh track to play when I read the part about community cooperation. But just to be sure, I did a little recon. That evening, I took a walk around the block, talked to a few neighbors, asked if Deborah had said anything to them. "Oh, her," one neighbor said. "She came by last week complaining about your driveway thing. Honestly, she's parked in my space before too." Another added, "She tried to say you were divisive. I think the word she's looking for is patient." By the time I returned home, I had my answer. Deborah's coalition was a one-woman army. Nobody was on her side. Not only that, she was burning bridges faster than she could build them. And somehow, she was only getting started. Saturday morning. The sun was out. The birds were chirping. My wife was watering the garden, and I was sipping my third cup of coffee while basking in the kind of peace that only comes after surviving multiple minor suburban wars. Then I saw her, at the end of my driveway, clipboard in hand, wearing a cardigan that screamed, "I bake passive aggression into my banana bread." Deborah Whitmore. Again. She was talking animatedly to a man walking his dog, gesturing toward my house like it had personally insulted her HOA dues. The poor guy looked confused, maybe even scared. His dog looked like it was trying to drag him to safety. I set down my mug and walked toward the curb. "Excuse me," I said, arms crossed. "What are you doing?" Deborah turned, her face painted with the fakest smile since reality TV was invented. "Oh, hello," she chirped. "I'm just collecting signatures for a neighborhood petition. Nothing major. Just trying to address some issues we're having with inconsiderate homeowners." I stared at her. "Inconsiderate homeowners?" "You," she said bluntly, the fake smile dropping like a mask at midnight. "Specifically you." I blinked. "You're circulating a petition." "About me." She held the clipboard tighter, as if it were a legal weapon. "Yes. You've been hostile. Uncooperative. This is a community, and you're refusing to engage in basic neighborly compromise. For not letting you park in my driveway? You had my car towed like some kind of tyrant," she snapped. "People like you shouldn't even live here if you can't get along with your neighbors." I leaned on the mailbox, keeping my tone casual. "How's the petition going so far?" Deborah paused, her eyes narrowing. "It's going fine. Can I take a look?" I asked, pointing at the clipboard. "Absolutely not," she barked, holding it behind her back like it contained state secrets. "Kind of like how my driveway is private," I said with a half-smile. Deborah sputtered like an old lawnmower. "You're impossible. Just wait. You'll see how many people are on my side." And with that, she spun around on her flats and stomped off down the street, flagging down the next neighbor like a door-to-door evangelist with a personal vendetta. About 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah, my next-door neighbor and low-key neighborhood queen of gossip. "Hey, just a heads up, Deborah came by with some insane petition about your driveway. Thought you'd want to know." I laughed, then called her. She said, "What?" I asked. Sarah snorted. "Something about you being territorial and creating a hostile parking environment." I told her we were just fine with how you handled everything. She did not look pleased. Apparently, Deborah had been door-knocking for hours, trying to get people to sign a document essentially declaring that I was the community villain for protecting my property. She pitched it like a movement, a noble cause, a rebellion against oppressive parking tyranny. But no one was buying it. By Sunday evening, I had a dozen texts from other neighbors. Every single one said the same thing. "Deborah came by. She's nuts. We didn't sign." One neighbor even offered to start a counter-petition to ban her from speaking for the neighborhood. Even Mrs. Patterson, the 82-year-old widow with 3 cats and 0 time for nonsense, told me, "If she knocks on my door again, I'll chase her off with my garden hose." That's when it hit me. Deborah didn't have allies. She had a reputation, and it was catching up to her like a wave of poetic justice. 2 days later, I saw her again. This time, she wasn't walking down the street with the confidence of a clipboard crusader. She was walking fast, head down, shoulders tense. No clipboard. When she passed my house, I gave her a little wave. She didn't look up. She never does anymore. But just when I thought the saga had peaked, when I was ready to retire my imaginary crown as king of the driveway, Deborah pulled one last move. Not a petition. Not a letter. Not a verbal assault with a sprinkle of HOA rage. No. She built a fake barricade. They say desperation makes people do strange things. Some people find religion. Some find therapy. And some, like Deborah Whitmore, find 2 orange traffic cones, a plastic no parking sign from Amazon, and a roll of painter's tape. I kid you not. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just come home from work, mentally checked out and ready for leftovers and silence. But when I pulled onto my street, I slowed to a crawl. My driveway had been turned into a barricaded zone. There they stood, 2 sad, sun-faded orange cones placed like soldiers on either side of the entrance. In between them, a flimsy "No parking" community-use-only sign taped to a PVC pole and anchored in a cinder block. And to top it all off, a handwritten note attached like a decree from a HOA dictator. "This driveway is now shared community property. Violators will be reported to neighborhood management." I stared. Not in anger. Not even disbelief. Just awe. It was the kind of thing that made you wonder, am I awake? Did I fall into a sitcom and no one told me? Is there a hidden camera crew behind the hydrangeas? My wife came outside, looked at the setup, and without missing a beat said, "She's cracked." And honestly, she wasn't wrong. I took out my phone, took pictures from every angle. Wide shot, close up, a dramatic zoom on the note. Honestly, I could have submitted them as evidence to Judge Judy and won a full hour of airtime. Then I walked over, picked up the cones, the sign, and the cinder block, and casually tossed them onto Deborah's lawn like yesterday's recycling. I didn't ring the doorbell. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say a word, because I wasn't playing anymore. This wasn't a neighborly disagreement. This wasn't about misunderstandings or parking space shortages. This was a woman who had declared psychological warfare via office supplies. That night, I filed a non-emergency police report, not to get her arrested, but to document the escalation. I also printed out every photo, every note, and even screenshots of her fake petition being rejected. Because if Deborah wanted to turn this into a game of who had receipts, I was going to build a filing cabinet. And I wasn't done yet. Step 1. I installed a motion-activated security camera facing the driveway. It wasn't fancy, just clear enough to catch faces, plates, and any future attempts at cone-related terrorism. Step 2. I posted a new, professionally printed metal sign at the edge of the driveway. Private driveway. No parking. Violators will be towed at owner's expense. Surveillance in use. No sarcasm. No sass. Just cold, lawful energy. Step 3. I called the towing company again. "Hey, it's me," I said. "Oh," the dispatcher laughed. "You're the driveway guy." "Yep. Just letting you know, she might try again. Be ready." They assured me they were. Honestly, I think I was their new favorite customer. And just like clockwork, 2 days later, the camera dinged. Motion detected. I checked the feed and there she was. Deborah Whitmore, in full glory, pulling into my driveway like she owned the land it was poured on. She parked, got out, looked around suspiciously, adjusted her fake pearls, then walked toward her house like it was no big deal. And I didn't move a muscle. I didn't storm out. I didn't knock on her door. I just called the tow company. 30 minutes later, I was sipping chamomile tea on the porch when the truck rolled in. It was poetic. The chains clinked. The hydraulics hummed. Her car was lifted off the pavement with the grace of karma in action. When Deborah saw it, she lost it. She came charging down the street, arms flailing like she was trying to land an invisible plane. "Where's my car?" "Probably at the impound lot," I said, not even bothering to stand. "Didn't you see the sign?" Her face turned crimson. "You can't keep doing this." "It's not illegal," I said calmly. "It's my property. You're trespassing. I've warned you. There's now video surveillance. And if this continues, I'll file a formal complaint for harassment." She let out a guttural scream, not words, just pure noise, and stormed off down the street. That was the last time she ever parked in my driveway. Word spread fast after that. By the next morning, my phone was blowing up with texts from neighbors. "Bro, we saw the tow truck again." Legend. Absolute legend. Karen strikes out. Even the local mailman gave me a thumbs up. Deborah? She vanished into the background like a bad meme no one reposts anymore. She still lives across the street. But now, every time she walks past my house, her eyes hit the ground like gravity got stronger just for her. And me? I had my driveway back. And I had a neighborhood that finally understood. Some boundaries are made of concrete. Literally. There's a moment after every great war. Yes, even a suburban one, when the dust settles and silence becomes the loudest sound. That was me, sitting on my porch. No tow trucks. No yelling. No traffic cones. Just peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, my wife and I could pull into our own driveway, without having to brace for passive-aggressive warfare. We could leave groceries in the car without worrying they'd spoil while we knocked on Deborah's door. My elderly dad could visit without stepping over a hand-painted community use sign. Life had returned to normal. Almost. Because even after the chaos ended, the legend began. It started with a joke. My neighbor Greg, who always had a beer in one hand and a dad joke in the other, walked past my house one afternoon and said, "Careful, man. You're entering the Karen zone." I laughed. Thought nothing of it. But then Sarah said it. Then the high schooler down the street. Then the FedEx guy. Suddenly, my driveway wasn't just a driveway anymore. It was a landmark. People would walk by, point, and whisper to their friends. "That's the one. That's where it happened." Like they were visiting the site of some legendary battle. Honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if someone started offering guided tours. On your left, we have the sacred pavement where Karen's Honda Civic was taken by the gods of towing. I came home one day to find someone had slipped a mock parking ticket under my windshield. It read, "Violation, too much justice. Fine, 1 free beer from your neighbor's clinking beer mugs." Deborah, meanwhile, had transformed from menace to myth. No one saw her much anymore. When she did appear, she walked faster, head down, like the sidewalk personally offended her. Every now and then, I'd spot her out of the corner of my eye, lurking by her mailbox, pretending to check for letters no one ever sent. And every time she caught me looking, I'd offer a friendly little wave. She never waved back. It's weird. I don't even feel angry at her anymore. Just amused. Maybe even a little sorry. She tried so hard to control something that wasn't hers. She created drama, chaos, a literal paper trail of entitlement. And in the end, she lost everything: respect, reputation, and a reliable parking space. I think what really undid her wasn't the towing or the signs or the cameras. It was the silence. The quiet realization that no one was on her side. That all the neighbors she tried to rally against me, they were just tired of her, too. That even in her own war, she stood alone. She had turned herself into a cautionary tale. As for me, I still park in the same spot. Still drink my coffee on the porch every morning. Still enjoy the quiet. But now there's a little more satisfaction in the air. A little more peace. And every time I see a car slow down near my driveway, I know they're thinking the same thing. Better not. That's the Karen zone. And if another Deborah ever tries to test those lines again, let's just say, the tow truck driver and I are on a first-name basis.